Hey, this is Bill from Tutor Bros. Today I want to go over how to multiply and divide fractions. So luckily this is easier than adding and subtracting fractions, which we will have a video on. But for now, we'll go through how to multiply and divide fractions. And we have three examples here, two of them multiplication, one division. We'll go through each one to show how you go about actually multiplying and dividing when it comes to fractions. So in the first example, we have 3 divided by 6, or 3 over 6, times 4 over 7. So when you're multiplying two fractions together, you take the numerator of the first fraction, which is 3, and multiply it by the numerator, or the top number, of the second fraction, which is 4. So in this case, we have it equal to 12, which is the numerator of this new fraction we're making, and that is the numerator which you found by multiplying the two numerators together of each fraction. Now to find the denominator, we multiply the denominator of the first fraction, which is 6, times the denominator of the second fraction, which is 7. So 6 times 7 equals the denominator of the new fraction we're making, 42. So your answer is 12 over 42. And that's how you multiply two fractions together. So we can simplify this fraction by dividing out on the top and bottom the highest common factor between the numbers 12 and 42. So we'll divide out by 6. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. So we're simplifying the numerator, and to simplify the denominator, divide 42 by 6 as well, and you get 7. So your simplified fraction, when multiplying the first two fractions together, is 2 divided by 7. And that's the answer to the first one. So the second example is a division of fractions. So we have 5 over 8 divided by 7 over 4. So when you're dividing two fractions, you can basically rewrite it as, we'll rewrite the first fraction the same as we have before, but instead of dividing by 7 over 4, we're going to rewrite it as multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 4 divided by 7. And you actually get the same result. So a division of fractions is similar, or it's the same as multiplying two fractions, except the second fraction is the reciprocal of the original. So now we have a multiplication problem, 5 over 8 times 4 over 7. And we solve this the same way we did above. So we take the numerators of the first and second fraction, 5 and 4, you multiply them together and you get 20, which is the numerator of the new fraction we're making. And the denominator is found by, again, multiplying both denominators of the first and second fraction. 8 times 7 is 56. So again, we want to simplify. And we can divide by the highest common factor between both of them, which is 4 in this case. So we'll divide 20 by 4, and we get 5 for the numerator. And 56 divided by 4 is 14. So that's the simplified fraction for the second example. So we did multiplication of two fractions, division of two fractions. Now we have, as a third example, is a multiplication of three fractions. So in this case, we follow the same rule, except we're going to multiply all three numerators together. And you're going to multiply all three denominators together to get the denominator of the new fraction. So we can simplify at the end after we multiply the numerators and denominators out, but we can also simplify before we start multiplying. So a way to simplify two fractions when you're multiplying them together is you can cancel out a common factor between the numerator of the first and the denominator of the second. So in this case, we have 2 over 5 times 11 over 8. So I can simplify before we start multiplying by crossing out the 2 and writing a 1 here. And then in the denominator of the second, I can cross out the 8 and write a 4 because I'm dividing by 2 in the denominator and then 2 in the numerator of the first fraction. Now, I can do this, but I can only do that between two fractions once. So you got to be careful when you have three fractions involved here. I can further simplify, but it's between the second fraction and the third fraction. So in the second, in the denominator, I have a 4. I can actually cross that out again and write a 2 because I'm dividing by 2. And then in the numerator of the third, I have a 2, which I can cross out. And if I divide that by 2, I have a 1. So I've pretty much simplified it as much as we can here before multiplying it out. And you can do that because you're going to simplify it in the end anyway, but even before you start to multiply, you could simplify these fractions, obviously before you start multiplying them, which can make multiplying it easier sometimes rather than simplifying at the end, but either method works. You just got to be careful when you're canceling out numerators and denominators between, more than two fractions at a time. So if we follow the same rules as we did above, for the numerator of the first, second, and third fractions, we have 1 times 11 times 1. So we have 11 for the numerator. And then in the denominator, for the first fraction, we have 5 times 2 in the second times 3 in the third fraction. So 2 times 5 is 10 times 3 is 30. So we have 11 over 30. And as you can see, this cannot be simplified any further, and that's because we simplified it before we multiplied it. So again, multiplying three fractions, you follow the same rule, which is multiply all the numerators together, and you get the numerator of the answer, and then multiply all the denominators of the fractions together, and you get the denominator. And for dividing, for the second fraction, when you're dividing by the second fraction, you can rewrite it as multiplying by the reciprocal. So that's how you multiply and divide fractions.